Here we are, Life in Stages. I'm Joel Greenberg, and we are in Series 2. And today I am I am delighted to welcome Jessica Greenberg. Yes, Jessica is my daughter. Actually, I'm her father. Hello, Jess.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you for making your way here. We're in the studio with Mike. And I'm going to start, this is going to be a little, well, it's going to be different, obviously, but I like to start by checking with people, with all of the guests. I'm very curious to know about each guest's childhood. Was performing, the arts, where did that feature in your youth? And because this is where you've dedicated your life, your professional life, is this a natural development from where you were? But not but. So why don't you tell us about what it's like, what it was like growing up, and what influences you did or didn't have about where you are now?
Sure. Well, you will not be surprised to, and anyone listening to this will probably not be surprised to know that theater and performance was a part of my life from my earliest memories. Recently, I have two daughters, and my mom and my daughters were listening to a cassette tape of me singing songs from the musical Grease when I was 3. So some of my very earliest memories are of being in rehearsal with you in various shows. Grease, I remember the roar of the grease paint, the smell of the crowd. I think those were both at Stephen Leacock High School. And so, yeah, always a part of everyday life. Going to see shows, being taken to the theater are really exciting, formative memories. And then performing shows in the living room, in the basement, wherever we could, with anybody who would let me rope them into a production. A chorus line was an early production of mine. Cats. I think we did a lot of performing of Cats. Grease, of course. Some of childhood friends earliest friends that I'm still friends with now, talk about how they were roped into these also, and I was also doing gymnastics a lot when I was young, and my gymnastics friends would come over and I'd make them do plays, and then I'd have other friends who thought, it'd be kind of fun to do a show, but I'd make them do gymnastics. So it was always there, always present, but not the only thing I was doing. I was a competitive gymnast as a child, so that was a big part of my life, and because I there was a big portion of my childhood when I was at the gym more than I was anywhere else, probably more than I was at home. Yeah. So there wouldn't have been time to do anything else, really. And I have early memories of, I must have been, 7 or 8. And I remember you suggesting, maybe you want to try out audition for the National Ballet School. Okay, do you remember this at all?
No.
Anyone suggesting? I was probably little. I must have been 6 or 7, and probably when I was really getting into gymnastics and showing an aptitude for jumping and being flexible and things like that. And I remember you saying, they're having tryouts for the National Ballet, which is hilarious. I can't imagine myself in that context at all, but I was pretty little, and my mom being like, absolutely not. Are you out of your mind? No, she's not going to school, the ballet school. So that was off the table. And then I remember wanting to go to Claude Watson for grade 4.
Okay.
And my mother saying, absolutely not. You're gonna learn academic things. And so it was always a part of life, but not the focus.
Yeah. I mean, I certainly remember how busy we were as a family, and but you're right, and you did go to Claude Watson in high school, but you were there for dance,
yeah,
right?
And And even when I was there, like I
Yeah.
loved it. It was such a great program, and I enjoyed the dance program. But even my time there, I was never there thinking, oh, I'm going to become a professional dancer. Like
Yeah.
for studying dance for 5 years, there was never a thought in my mind like this is it. And there were people in that class who did go on to professional careers who are still dancing, and it was very clear at the time, like they were going to be doing that, and it was sort of this is a fun thing to do high school, and I can kind of live out my fantasies having grown up watching Fame and pretend I'm at PA and in New York, but it really, I always had other ideas and other pursuits, and it wasn't until I was almost completed a 4-year poli-sci degree at McGill University that it occurred to me that this was going to be a long-term professional pursuit.
So do you have any idea either when that happened or how that happened? Because I do remember, certainly when you were at McGill, that you were very involved extracurricularly and with a lot of music people, and it was a fabulous group of people. But I know you took maybe no theater. I mean, you weren't doing any theater courses.
I took one theater history course, and it was so boring. And I don't remember who taught that course, but I don't remember the lectures being interesting at all. I don't remember really enjoying a lot of the plays we were reading. And I was taking poli-sci and some English and a lot of women's studies courses, and loving my classes and being really engaged in that work, but spending all of my time outside of class at McGill Players Theatre.
Right.
Or alternately with some folks that I met who were doing stuff kind of beyond McGill campus, and some Concordia and McGill and former McGill students and some students around Montreal doing other stuff. And that's where it happened, from meeting those folks. And I arrived at McGill, and I had also been really interested in journalism. I think if you had asked me in grade 13, because there was grade 13 then, what I was going to do after school, I probably would have said I'm going to be a journalist. And I had a really formative experience mentoring with Naomi Klein at this magazine for my final year of high school. And that was a fantastic experience. And I was really thinking that was going to be my path. And I went to McGill, and one of the first days of school, I sought out extracurriculars, and I went to the campus newspaper, the McGill Daily, and signed up to write an article. And they gave me some political beat. I was going to go to a student council meeting and report on something they were passing, or I don't really remember, but I went to do that, and I signed up to audition for a play in the drama building. On the board, there were some plays happening, student-run plays, and I signed up to audition for a production of the Children's Hour. And I went, and I wrote the article and went through that process and met with the editors and did that, and was like, oh, this is really boring, and this student council meeting is really boring, and this isn't that. It wasn't the investigative journalism I maybe pictured. And I auditioned for the Children's Hour, and I got in, and it was the best experience of my life. It was so much fun. Yeah. And I was one of the younger students, and there were a lot of second, third, fourth year, and it's the Children's Hour, so a lot of gals, and these older gals at McGill who kind of took me under their wing, and it felt like real community, and I met one of my, to this day, closest friends doing that show, and it was so much fun, and I just stayed there, and that was it.
Yeah. No, I remember I was working in Montreal a fair amount, maybe during your third year, but at some point when we saw each other and you said, I want to be an actor, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it surprised me, I guess, only because it was something I knew that you'd been doing, but your commitment to it was so strong and so clear. it was exciting that you were that committed to what you wanted to do. So you finished McGill, and then you did training, right?
I did, yeah. I mean, I don't remember I don't remember saying to you I want to be an actor, but I do remember auditioning, deciding to pursue that when every other person I knew was writing the LSAT and trying to get into law school. And I would, tell my fourth year professors in these poli-sci seminars, they were like, do you want me to write your letter for law or whatever, law school? And it's like, no, I'm going to be an actor. And they kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? But I did. I auditioned for schools. And then when I was accepted at the school I eventually went to at Circle in the Square in New York, I remember being in the green room at Players Theater at McGill. I remember getting the letter, like a hard copy letter in the mail at home and walking. I was on my way to an early morning weekend rehearsal. It's McGill campus on a Sunday morning. Me and the other 6 members of this company were probably the only people who were awake, and going to that empty campus and going to use the phone and in the green room and calling you and telling you I got in, and then I said, can I go? Like, you kind of laughed, like you were going to, after all that, I'd like gone to New York and you were going to be like, no. But do you remember what you said?
I remember you asking me if you could go. I don't remember what I said.
You said, you kind of laughed. You were like, yeah. And you said, you also might want to really look into stage management.
Did I say that at the same time?
Yes. Wow. You were like, just don't take being a stage manager off the table. Like, sure you can, but you might want to pursue something that will have a little more potential for work.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are you talking about?
Well,
yeah.
Okay. Well,
but I did. I did. I went to New York and I went to Circle in the Square.
Okay. So now you've moved from being at McGill in a liberal arts setting, and now so you go from there to being in New York, where you've certainly never lived before, in a conservatory program.
Mm-hmm.
So can you, what is your memory now of that time when you first arrived? I mean, apart from the fact, I think you arrived, no, you were there for a couple, like in your second year when it was 9/11? I know you were in
I had already
York.
graduated from school. Yeah.
Okay. So what's it like to be arriving in New York in a school where presumably you don't know anybody, in a city where you are? Because I remember, one of the things I do remember is years before that, I don't remember exactly how many, we were in New York and we were walking somewhere in the theater district, and you said, I really want to live here.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, without knowing that was actually going to happen. So from you, you talk now.
Yeah, I did really want to live there. I just wanted to go there. I didn't even apply to any schools in Toronto. I just wanted to go to New York, and it was fantastic. I mean, it was very extreme. It's really like, I found my experience of living in that city, high highs and low lows, and on a bad day that city will really kick your ass. But I loved it. I mean, I think being a student, having the privilege to be a student anywhere is like the greatest, easiest way, I think, to live somewhere, to experience a place, because and a small conservatory like that, it's not a massive institution, so there's a built-in community and a built-in care, and you have your small little class and your automatic friend group, and it felt quite manageable. I mean, I don't remember feeling that nervous or afraid or out of my depth. It just felt like what I was supposed to be doing, and it was really fun. It was really fun to be there and to live there and be studying theater in a place where there's so much theater. I mean, I just went to plays all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And, I guess there always is discussion about theater school experiences, practices.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly I'd say I'm aware of conversations that I've read about more than heard, but some that I've heard about as well. In the last, 5, 7, 8 years, something like that, just about the treatment that students in theater schools have often endured.
Yeah.
And I don't, what was your experience at Center in the Square?
Circle.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, of course. I've heard so many of those stories and experiences too, and it wasn't a hard experience. I wasn't mistreated.
Yeah.
There are some things that I look back that are kind of funny. It was it's very American, very New York, very method, and I think at any school, whoever is kind of like the central main acting teacher,
Mm-hmm.
their pedagogy and their point of view tends to prevail and take over the culture of the school in many ways. So
Mm-hmm.
the main scene study acting teacher at the time, and we did in first year we did contemporary scenes, and then all of second year was pretty much just Chekhov. So it was all very Stanislavski based,
Mm-hmm.
technique wise, and like really a lot of method stuff. So that was how I was trained, and everything was about just this is real and the living with it. So anything we didn't get any training or guidance having anything to do with the fact that what we were studying was in pursuit of a job,
Right.
or a career, really. Like, I feel like that would have been almost like sacrilegious. So even like words like costume or scene, or like any of our like my teacher's pedagogy was to actually look at you and say, I don't know what you mean. Or I think at one point, one of my first scene study coachings, and we're working on a moment and got a note, suggestion, do this. And I think I may have said like, oh, should we go back from the top or something? And he looked at me and the top of what? Like, so like we were really called out on any kind of jargon to do with theater. Everything was real. When we did kind of a graduating production of The Crucible, we were taught like you had to be in character all the time, right? Very method. Like, I guess this is where all those movie stars you hear about who are just like, you have to call them by their character name, all those cliches. That was how we were instructed. That's
Right.
what we were told to do. So, we were, and The Crucible is a very long play. So some of us, like myself, I played Betty Paris. I was cast as, the little girl who freaks out in the first scene, and then she's not in, like, then there's 3 more hours of play where I just kind of have to hang around backstage. And, we weren't supposed to sit and like talk, I was supposed to be as if I was, possessed by witches hundreds of years ago. Like, I couldn't, get out some knitting or something to pass the time. I guess maybe knitting would have been appropriate to the period. Something, a crossword puzzle would have been like, so that was kind of funny. I know it was really, and I'm sure I said this at one point. I think I probably called home and was kind of angry at you and Mom for having given me like a loving, stable childhood free of excessive trauma, because I was made very aware in theater school that I might not have what it takes because I just simply don't have enough real life trauma to draw from. That was a lot of the training, was dredging up trauma and like putting that on stage. And if you couldn't just break down drawing from your past experiences, like you're maybe not a real artist. So I remember struggling with that quite a bit in school. I think my most successful lauded scene work came at a time when some casting announcements had gone up, and I was personally really disappointed. I wasn't happy with what I had been cast in, and I felt upset, and I, felt looked over and really disappointed in myself, and was feeling, really bummed, and went into my acting class and was going to do a scene, and I kind of broke down crying because I was just really sad having received this disappointing news 5 minutes prior, and my teachers being like, yes, that is it. Like, Jesus Christ, do I have to just seek misery in my life in order to do this job always? So
I was just listening to a really good interview with Mike Lee, one of my favorite filmmakers, and he's asked in this interview if he's ever worked with method actors, because Mike Lee's as far away from that as you can imagine. He said, no. He said, well, I have. He said, but no. He said, I've never, ever believed, you can get into character, but then you have to also be able to step out of character rather than, carry your character around and have everybody refer to you by your character's name, that sort of thing. Yeah. He said, I have no patience. He said, I know people do it. He said, I simply don't understand why anybody would do that. So having been in that environment, how much of that, how much of it do you carry into your professional life?
Yeah, well, some of it, I mean, for mining our experience and what we know about the world and how we move through the world can absolutely be a useful tool, I think. And I think there's something to be said about being focused and committed backstage. You see the extremes, right? Like I'm not. I don't think it's going to be helpful for me as an actor to be in the dressing room doing, something totally counter to what's happening on stage 20 seconds before rushing on. That's not a good idea. But that's not how I move through life.
Okay.
Typically.
Well, this is sort of going back to just sort of to end the conversation about the quality of the teaching, I guess, and the experience, the emotional experience. When you told me that you were accepted to Circle in the Square, I remember sending a note to about half a dozen people I knew in the States who were very familiar with theater training programs. I said, I certainly knew of the program, but I didn't know it well enough, and I certainly didn't have personal experience. I said, I'm just curious. My daughter's just been accepted to this program. Is there something that you can tell me about it? And the people who responded all said the same thing. They said it's probably the kindest environment. Said it's not a school that prides itself on, tough, sort of daring people to do things, which I found it was very reassuring to hear that. So you finished, you did the program, and then you were in New York for at least one more year. And I know you're
2 more years.
2 more years, and I know that you then were on tour, right?
Yeah, for part of that time.
So you were sort of moved from the school directly into the profession, right?
Well, I did an apprenticeship for the summer at the Actors Theatre of Louisville, which was another training, which was a fantastic experience, and I think. Again, like one of the greatest, most cherished times of my early life. Just working with a small company, about 8 of us, and a trainer, mentor at that theater at that time was fantastic. That was just like working and doing and being around people who were just as excited about trying stuff, and it was great. We did classes, and we were doing Suzuki training and a lot of viewpoints training, and we were learning a lot about cold reading. Our teacher really emphasized that and how important that would be. We just read plays constantly. And it was the first time I'd ever created something, written something. That was terrifying, but I think the first and last time, but I just need someone to force me to do that. But that was a fantastic experience, and meeting all kinds of really interesting people and building community in a fantastic way, really. Cause that's why I got into it. I think that was the distinction back at McGill between, writing for the paper versus being in the play, right? Like that, right. That activity was so isolating. It was just like me writing this thing and whereas being in rehearsal was just being a part of community and then meeting more people, meeting, the Da Capo Second Company crew in Montreal who really were the ones who opened my eyes to, this is a possibility. This is how I want to live. This is how I'm finding my joy.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about the Actors Theatre of Louisville because it's a really important theatre company, and I remember how exciting it was for Mom and for me to visit you there, just to be in that space, right? And to realize. I certainly knew of it, and I read a lot about things they were doing, but to actually be there and said, no, this is exactly what I imagined it to be.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it was so much fun, and all our spare time was spent together and making stuff. And we'd finish our day, and then we'd get together in someone's apartment and read another play together, and that's all. It was so much fun.
Yeah. So then when you finished school, you were touring, right?
Yeah, well, then I went back to New York, and I was there for the fall, and I think the tour first rehearsal started like January 2nd or something. So I had I did an off Broadway play as part of like some new play festival in some tiny theater, that like 7 people came to watch or something. And then, and then toured across the country in a TYA show that went to schools. We went, we'd go to like 3 different gyms a day, and I made it to Southern California, and then was like, okay, I'm done. In the it's like this huge kind of machine of TYA theater that tours across the country, and it's based in New York. So I kind of knew the ins and outs, and I kind of knew how long you had to work to get your weeks to get insurance, to get health insurance when you were done, and how long before, to get this in place, and then how much notice you had to give to get out. And I was like, okay, this is my plan to get here, because I hadn't really had the experience of living in New York, so I didn't want to spend my whole time there in sharing motel rooms with 4 other people or whatever we were doing to save the $50 a week or whatever. We were making almost no money. So then I came back and stayed in New York a little bit longer.
Yeah. And then you moved back to Toronto. I don't even know that I've ever asked you this, but I'm really curious. Having spent several years in New York and having worked there as well, so you had both the school and the professional experiences. What was it like to come back to Toronto, where you hadn't trained? You hadn't lived in Toronto for a long time because you were in McGill.
Yeah, I was gone for 8 years.
Yeah.
It felt just a lot more manageable. I was really ready to come back, and I also was at a certain point going back and forth and didn't have work papers. Like there was a lot I couldn't start doing when I was in New York. I had an agent, and I could audition for like huge things, which was exciting and fun and a great experience for sure, right? But I auditioned for like a lead in a Broadway show that would be cast by a movie star, of course, so that was great, but also felt like I don't know what I'm actually gonna get to do here, and I couldn't audition for commercials. I couldn't do all that stuff that you needed work papers for. So it just felt at a certain point quite limiting. And then just politically and globally, like 9/11 happened, and I lived through that. And then like George Bush got elected like again. And that happened. And I was just feeling, the invasion of Iraq happened, right? Like all these things were happening that were also making me feel more and more isolated just from that place and craving home. And home Toronto was a lot more accessible. Like in Toronto, I could write to an artistic director and say, hey, I've just finished training and I'm coming back home and I'd love to meet you. And they'd go, oh, great. Yeah. Like come in and do some, show me a couple monologues and have a conversation. And, I could get submitted for an audition and be like, yes, here's your time. Come to this theater on Monday at 4 p.m. and we will see you, as opposed to lining up on the street at 5 a.m. to maybe be seen in an open call. It was just that was a bit of a relief, and it felt more manageable and accessible at that time. Although what I didn't have was that community kind of in hindsight and people ask me all the time about theater school and stuff. And the thing I don't for a second regret going there or being there, and my experience there was fantastic. And I love that I got to live there for that time. It was fantastic. And what I didn't do, and I had not even thought of this ahead of time, was build an artistic community, because anyone I'd been in school with, I was then separated from. Like all my friends from my class are in New York or LA now. Right. And then I had to kind of start from scratch here. Like I don't have that community of people that we share a vocabulary and an artistic base together from training to build something with. So I didn't have that coming back here.
Is Toronto welcoming?
Yeah, I thought so.
Good. Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, you got work in Toronto pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, and that was part of the reason coming back too, right? Like I was there kind of like, well, I can keep, babysitting and, doing like weird unpaid stuff or cool unpaid stuff, and audition for like huge things and maybe, star in a major motion picture, or I could just have this like actual job, so I thought the prospect of being in a play in Toronto was very appealing.
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the non-theater work that you did in New York? I mean, you had to survive in New York. I remember after 1 year, I think it was after your first year, at some point you said you didn't want to come home for the summer. And we said, if you can support yourself, then you can stay in New York. And you did.
Yeah.
And you were able to carve out several careers. So what does a theater student, or maybe any student, how do you live?
Yeah, who's also undocumented, so everything's under the table. I mean, I did a lot of serving. I worked at a Russian restaurant where I think the entire time I worked there, they maybe had 4 customers. Like I'm not sure what that place was about, and I was often being encouraged by my female boss to like wear a shorter skirt and go out to the corner to hand out flyers to like solicit business to come to eat caviar in this restaurant. I didn't last very long there. At some point, someone said, "Oh, I think this other place, Two Boots Pizza in the East Village is hiring." I don't know who gave me that tip, but I made my way there, and then that was great. That was the place where I worked the most, and it was like a nice kind of like local neighborhood family pizza place where I worked and had a lot of fun, worked with good people. And at some point, like a new manager came in and he kept asking me for my paperwork, and every day I would just be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot it anyway." And then I did a lot of childcare. I did a lot of babysitting and nannying. When I did have a visa, I was doing gymnastics coaching for young for like celebrity babies. Like Robert De Niro's son was in my class, and I always had a hope that he really struggled with like attaching to the coaches, and he really didn't seem to like me or anyone else very much. And I think at some point his caregiver had the idea of like they would take Polaroids of us and like put them up on his wall so that when they were going to bed and he'd be like, look, there's Jessica. She's so nice. She's going to teach you how to do a cartwheel. And like, there's Susie, whatever. So, and I was like, oh my God, my picture is like up on Robert De Niro's like toddler's wall. And I just had like this total vision of Robert De Niro reading his child a bedtime story. And then like just kind of out of the, being like, who is that? Like she will be in my next movie. That didn't materialize. Jerry and Jessica Seinfeld's baby was in the class. So I taught gymnastics to some of those babies, and then through them met a family who kind of poached me and was like, come and just work for us. And so I did a lot of nannying, which I really loved. I worked for these Israeli club promoters for a little bit. I can't remember how I came to them. But they would just host parties in various clubs every weekend, and they just kind of had like this list of people who had attended their parties, and I just had to like go to one of their apartments and call people to be like, hey, like, did you have fun last Saturday? There's another party next Saturday. I did that. Through my school, actually, this was another weird job. I assisted this guy who sold jewelry at street fair. So in New York, they have them here, but it's like Taste of the Danforth or Taste of Little Italy kind of. They're these fairs that are positioned like they're going to be these like rich cultural experiences, and they're completely not. Like you want to go there and really like savor the sights and sounds of Greece or Italy or, you know, or whatever that neighborhood is, but it's all just crap from the dollar store, like repackaged, right? Like, so this guy whose sister would import jewelry from wherever, you know, from somewhere across the world in some factory, you know, just like total junk, like crap that would arrive by like tons of it, just mass manufactured. And then he'd, you know, take it out of the packages and arrange a few of them to look like they were custom made jewelry. He was a comedian, and he was doing this I don't think he was a actively working comedian, but he was living with his parents on the Upper West Side, and this was his hustle, and he hired me to sit with him at these fairs and try to convince passersby that it wasn't.
And this was through school?
Yeah, like maybe he had gone to Circle and he had maybe gone to the school to say, are there any students here looking for a little extra, you know, but it was a long day. It was whatever I got paid, $10 an hour, which was a lot then, and for like a 12-hour day. And I would just sit with this guy, and he was actually really funny. Like, I don't think he was a successful comedian, but maybe he became one because he was very funny. So there are worse ways to spend a day than sitting with this guy is pretty funny. But there was always that like ethical feeling of like, oh, don't buy this. This is not a real bracelet. I did that. For one day I handed out flyers at the half-price ticket booth. Okay. But they were specifically for the Forbidden Broadway show, a franchise that I'm very fond of, is hilarious. But as much as I think Forbidden Broadway is hilarious, and I've always enjoyed the recordings, and I've gone to see the live shows, and it's really, really funny, I also wouldn't recommend it for like the average tourist in town with their family who's, you know, spending their money on like one Broadway show. Like, that's the worst possible choice for the people. They're going to see one musical in their life. They shouldn't be seeing, you know, this parody of all the musicals that they'll have no reference. And so I felt like a bit conflicted about that. I did that for one day. I was like, I can't tell these people they should go, like, they shouldn't be seeing, no, they should be going to see Rent or Cats or, you know, this is not what they should be going to see.
Well, I know that I think you were still in high school. Yeah, you were. When one summer, I think you had a short-lived job working on a production of Forbidden Broadway in Toronto.
Yes.
That wasn't that funny. I mean, it wasn't the performer's fault, but I also directed a production of it, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I have a pretty good memory of people sitting in the audience laughing at the obvious stuff.
Yeah.
So when somebody imitated Ethel Merman, the audience that came to it knew what that was. But
yeah, it's pretty niche.
Yeah. Mostly it was people sitting, waiting to laugh and wondering.
When are the jokes coming?
That's right.
Yeah, I love Forbidden Broadway. I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But yeah. Oh, and my job on that was also, I mean, I probably shouldn't even talk about it. People will get arrested if I talk about the work I did on that show, because there's no way that I was legally employed doing that. I was basically the assistant stage manager, but I was not a member of Equity or any union, and I was not. I was hired as something else, like you'd be like an assistant of the show or something. And at the time I knew nothing. I had no idea. And now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, I was the assistant stage manager that was way underpaid and totally not according to any union regulations. But that's the job I was doing. Also, like, completely unqualified. And I missed cues all the time. I had no idea. And I'd like sit backstage and be kind of like, oh shoot, like, that was like that lighting cue, like that chandelier I'm supposed to bring on like, I was terrible at setting props. Like, I can't believe those people didn't hate me. I was so bad at that job.
So it probably was a good thing that even though I said you might want to consider stage
wrong.
manager.
Yeah, you were wrong.
Okay.
You were wrong. I think I possess some qualities that would, but I think in many ways I would not be a good.
Okay.
I don't have that kind of attention to detail. I really don't.
Okay. So so now you're in Toronto and you're working, and I guess shortly after you came back, you helped. You sort of joined Studio 180 when we were doing our second the remount of the Laramie project.
Yeah.
And then that became, I think not a surprise, but there was never a plan for the company to be an ongoing entity. It was to do the Laramie project, period. And then it grew and it became a very different thing. And you've been an integral part of that since.
Yeah.
And I know, I certainly can't speak for you or Mark or Kimwin or any of the people who, like the three principal people who were committed to working with the company, who are actors, and you had to develop or take on other jobs, right? So that creating an education program, for instance, which go. And I know that community outreach and school education, I know those have become that's your territory now.
Yeah.
So how prepared, how did you do that?
Yeah. I don't know. I think my whole life and everything I've always done has been pretty DIY. Even back at Circle in the Square, like I said, that story where the casting came out and I was like, I'm not happy with this casting. And I had a friend, Chris Foster, who was in my class, and I think we had like an alignment at kinship because he'd also done a poli-sci degree. He went to Georgetown for poli-sci. We were kind of the only people coming from that weird place into this place, so we kind of had like a shared point of view in some ways, and he also was in the same boat, and we kind of were like, hey, like this sucks, and we just had these. We're like, well, like forget this. Let's do our own play. And he had a script. He had the Kenneth Lonergan script. And he was like, oh, I saw this a couple years ago, and I really love this play, and there's 3 parts, and there's this other guy at our school, Brad, who I think he'd want to do this too. And we went to the administration and we're like, can we just produce our own show? And they were like, well, no one's ever done that before. We're like, so? And they were like, yeah, good point. Like, sure, why not? So that's just, I never thought about it or planned that, but that's always been the way I've done stuff. Like in my personal life too, if I'm going to plan an event or, in the way I raise my family, like, I guess I'm comfortable with making it up as I go along. And I think I don't really want people to tell me what to do in many ways. I kind of want to decide for myself how it's going to go. And I don't know, maybe there's an arrogance there. Like, don't tell me what, like, well, I know how this is going to go. So
well, it's
why
also,
not? It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And, I think for all of us, there's a period or there's a point perhaps where you can't pretend. You said you have to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
And you have to be nice, and decent to people. But you know what works for you.
Yeah.
And you know what doesn't. And if you're you're sort of putting on something rather than wearing something that is legit.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're all kind of faking it till we make it anyway. And like every single person you talk to will at some point say, oh, I have imposter syndrome and just eventually owning the fact that everyone feels that way. So, who cares? But yeah, it's so interesting coming back to this person, Chris, who I'm not even in touch with anymore, but I do remember another like really core memory toward the end of my time at Circle and being in New York around Midtown and getting tacos, and we're sitting on this patio, and I was at that point really struggling with reconciling these two parts of myself, because even though I had pursued this training and really loved acting and wanted to do theater, there was still this piece of me that felt a bit like I was abandoning that other part, and whether that had to do with a pursuit of justice or what was I going to do as an actor that was going to help to heal the world or to, make a difference and make change, and kind of this like, oh, sorry, like, what are we doing? Is this like a really self-centered, frivolous pursuit? And Chris was just like, well, you can totally do both. Like, it's not an either or. You can absolutely do both. And he didn't really lay it out in kind of a plan, but I do remember him saying that to me. And then it wasn't a plan, but what I ended up pursuing through all the education and community engagement work at Studio 180 became a true marriage of those two things. So like, however that happened, it is like, that is, that's my happy place and my joy. So I think I always had the skills. Like, I think I always really have related to young people and, did all that childcare and nannying and always like worked with kids and love that, for until I was like 40, I exclusively played children on stage too. Just being really short, looking young, having a young, even still, if I'm doing voice work, it's usually a character much younger than myself. And I think, who knows, it's like a chicken and egg thing. Have I been infantilized my entire life? So internalized those pieces of me, and that's just the only thing I know how to be, or I do, but I think I relate to young people. So I think I'm good at that. And I really enjoy doing that. And then through all the community engagement work I've done through Studio 180, just today, I just came from a meeting with a community partner for our next production. I mean, it's so rewarding and inspiring and fascinating, and it's cool that I get to keep learning. Not just keep learning, like as an actor, of course, I'm always learning about my craft and my own practice, but through the other work, I also get to keep learning about the world in a way that is a lot more akin to my earlier education, and I appreciate that.
That's great. So, as we sort of move toward the end of the conversation, like on a personal level, are you good at, or have you found a way to have a personal life? I know that I have never been very good at separating what I do professionally. I mean, it's just, everything is one thing, right? And that's not always very helpful to anybody who isn't me. But I mean, you've made reference to the fact that you have a family, you have 2 daughters, you have a husband, Mark, who also works at Studio 180 as the artistic director. So how do you create a personal life that is not secondary to the professional life? Or
Oh, yeah.
Or can you?
I mean, I think I do. Maybe if I didn't, my professional life would be more robust than it is. But I think I love being a mom, and no question, being a mom is my top priority. And I mean, having kids definitely changed everything, but really having a second child, I think, was a bigger impact. Like with one kid, you can kind of like schlep them around a bit. You can call in favors. You can get someone to take care of like one. You know, you can like bring your kid to the audition and like show up in the room and be like, can someone just hold this baby for 5 minutes? But like a baby and a toddler, that just is a total game changer. So yeah, but it was never a question in my mind. Like from almost the moment I met Mark, I knew, I was like, oh, like we're going to make a family together. And there's never been any question. So I guess just because of not only my, priority and commitment, but to really loving that. Like it's not just, obviously every parent loves their child and is committed to their child. Mm-hmm. But I get a lot of joy from the work of parenting. Mm-hmm. And, I've made choices to turn down other work because of what other people I think would probably, even like myself, intellectually think like that is would be a small sacrifice. Like I don't want to miss the last day of school, right? It's not like I don't want to miss my child's first birthday or like I want to be at my child's wedding or something that's sort of universally acknowledged as being a big deal. Mm-hmm. Like I don't want to miss the first day of not school ever, but like any school, right? Mm-hmm. Or like the last day of school or like, any dance performance.
Yeah.
So, that's an impediment to my working life for sure. But yeah, I don't know. For me, it's not hard finding a personal life. My family life is the best part of my life. And that's what has grounded me always. And my friendships are really important to me. Mm-hmm. My relationships are really important to me. And those aren't, I have good friends in the theater community, of course, but a lot of friendships and a lot of community that I've built beyond that.
Yeah. And I mean, since both you and Mark spend a lot of time with Studio 180.
Yeah.
How do you, I guess, negotiate that relationship? It sounds far more clinical than I mean it to be. But two professionals working together all the time and then going home and being with the family, is that ever an issue, or does it need?
No, I mean, I guess you'd have to ask him too, but I don't think so. And that's how we met. Like I met Mark because I was associate producer and education coordinator on the Laramie project. So that is just how I know him. And then from there that we did a fringe show together. And so our relationship is built on working together. So like that has never felt like a negotiation. Yeah. I mean, we haven't acted together in a really long time. Mm-hmm. So that's something that I would love to do again soon. It's been a really long time since we've had the opportunity to collaborate in that way, but I don't know, I think we work really, really well together. It's not a source of conflict. We are both fueled by similar interests and passions and pursuits. So that's really where we are. We have a lot of commonality there. That's what excites us and always has. So that's just kind of a point of connection. And I don't know. It doesn't feel like the toughest negotiation is financial, right? Because we both work in independent theater. I've often told the story of having dinner with my mom and a friend when I was, I think, still at McGill. Like I was young, and her saying something about like, don't underestimate the power of marrying rich, and kind of rolling my eyes like who is this monster? And it's not a terrible idea. I would not want to be with anyone else. I'm lucky. I have the best husband in the world, and we are very happy. I love our family. I love our marriage. If he happened to also be rich, I would not complain about that, right? It's not like a wise financial choice to pair up with someone who is equally as volatile and unstable, and but it's no surprise we didn't get into this with any illusions about what we were doing, and I could have gone to law school.
Yep.
So I think it's empowering to know like that it's a choice. It's not like I have been disadvantaged my whole life and have no opportunity to I'm good.
Okay, well, I'd like to finish by asking you, I'm going to ask you.
We're finishing with this.
Yeah. Have you had people who have mentored you or have inspired you or whether you were aware of it at the time or not? I mean, I think, now I'm just projecting myself, but I think that as a young theater student, an aspiring professional, sometimes you're so caught up in your own world and your own needs that, as people might be really helping to shape you, you don't always know that that's happening. Sometimes you understand that in hindsight. Sometimes you do know it at the time. I don't know if there have been I'm curious. I don't know if there have been people in your life that you think of or that were sort of touchstones of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, probably less in a mentorship way, but again, going back to that time when I was at McGill and working with the people who made me realize this is what I want to be doing, and Aoife Nally and Brent Crissa and Michael Gianfrancesco, and the three of them were collaborators, still great friends, and then kind of the ripples of that group. It's not just the three of them, but I think of them as they were the leaders and the nexus of that community of people doing work and just creating a space that was brave and joyful and creative and fun. The stakes sort of felt really, really high, but also not at all. I mean, I look back on so many experiences and just wish, I mean, you can't, it's impossible to know. Like, wish I could have known, like, the stakes aren't as high as you think they are right now. Like, relax, have fun. They're probably never going to listen to me, but that's what I tell my kids constantly, especially my eldest. Like, it's you have to enjoy this more. You have to have more joy. But I think it was those folks who were really, maybe that's where some of my DIY spirit came from, just from them who were like, we're going to just do our own thing. We're like creating something new. And I was along for that ride when the ice storm hit in Montreal and the city shut down, and everyone at McGill who was from another place like left, was like, no, I'm not going back. I'm staying here and we'll just all sleep in one bed with all of our blankets because we have to rehearse this show. Now, that's like the greatest times of my life. So those folks for sure.
Yeah, no, I think, the point about, don't take, like, enjoy it more or all of it. I do think some of that comes with experience and with age and with a different perspective, because I sometimes joke that as a I hope I never said this for real to actors, that just have fun, just go out and have fun with it, and everybody wants to be able to do that, but when you're working at something that you're so serious about, you want it to be so good.
Yeah.
I I think there's not a whole lot of room for fun because it's too serious.
Yeah. But there has to be. And Kim Won Parahenek is someone else who, when we were doing Offensive Shadows, which was another really, really fun show that Paul Dunn wrote, and we did it at Summerworks first, and then we remounted it, Studio 180, in the Tarragon Extra Space. And I remember, sharing a dressing room with Kim Won and feeling like just, the nerves and feeling really the anxiety and the nerves about going to do this show. And Kim Won just said, remember, you love this. And that was many years ago now, but that continues to be my mantra and what I pass along to my kids and to students and other young people I work with. There's no point in doing any of this if it's not filled with joy. That's my opinion.
Well, that's a good opinion, and it's a really lovely place to bring this conversation to an end, or to complete the conversation. So thank you. I mean, thank you very much, and it's been great having you in the studio. So it's not. I mean, most of our conversations happen on Zoom, and that's fine. But it's really fun to actually be able to talk. Yeah,
no more Zoom for me.
Okay. And I want to thank all of you who are listening and who I hope will tell your friends and everybody everybody at work, everybody you pass by. Please share this podcast, Life in Stages. We've got all of Series 1, and now we are building, and you are listening to Series 2. And to help the podcast continue, this is, as you know, advertising free. So any contributions you can make are really appreciated, and you can do that in two ways. If you are outside of Canada, you do it by going to Patreon, and it's Patreon, patreon.com/lifeinstages. And if you are here, it's really straightforward. You just email Jerica Life in Stages, JERICA Life in Stages @rogers.com. And that's how Life in Stages will continue to thrive. Thanks a lot. Thanks again, Jess. And looking forward to more guests. Bye-bye.